It is just after dawn, Thursday, July 11th, 1991. On this quiet beach in La Paz, Baja California, people are getting ready to observe and photograph one of nature's most spectacular events. The men and women gathered here are as diverse as the equipment they bring. Young and old, amateur and professional, all sharing a keen interest in astronomy. For some, this will be their first event. For others, it's like welcoming back an old friend. In the city of La Paz itself, people go about their daily lives as they have for hundreds of years. But this year, this day, is very different. Thousands of visitors from all over the world have come to La Paz with a single purpose in mind. Because on this day, something wonderful is about to happen. This is the story of the Great Eclipse of 1991, the longest total solar eclipse to occur anywhere on Earth until the year 2132. It's also the story of the men and women who travel the world time and time again to experience and photograph this rare event under the path of the moon's shadow. For the eclipse chasers, the expedition is far more than the brief moments of the eclipse. It is an international experience with enriching days of science and astronomy, lectures on astrophotography and solar phenomena, meetings with old friends, sharing eclipse stories, and a scientific equipment show with no equal. Join with us now as we meet the eclipse chasers and experience the Great Eclipse of 1991.
This project for Sky and Telescope began almost 4 years ago, and more than 3.5 years ago, Leif Robinson came down here on a reconnaissance to take a look at what type of hotels and facilities were available. And at the time, this is the honest truth, there was not a soul down here who was aware of the coming eclipse. So we brought that information in with us 3.5 years ago.
Duration here?
6 minutes and 25 seconds. The total eclipse runs about, from one end to the other, runs about 3 hours. So it's going to be sometime a little after 10 o'clock in the morning for first contact. And totality will begin at about 11:51, and middle eclipse is at 11:53. We will get the 6.5 minutes of totality here. You can stand out in the courtyard here and look up. You can stand out on some of the balcony areas and look up around the pool, down on the beach. It's just, the sun is virtually overhead at eclipse time. The beaches are all open here. They are not private. And whether or not there are other people that show up there on eclipse day, I don't know. But clearly, I mean, in the past, we've seen it where local people have felt they need to congregate where the tourists are because for some reason that's where the eclipse is visible. But I don't know how that will be on eclipse day here. But certainly it is all private right up in the area here.
Ask any eclipse chaser for one wish, and the answer is guaranteed.
Clear skies.
Clear skies.
And that's the risk. Fog, clouds, sandstorms. Anything can and will happen. Some eclipse expeditions maximize their chances of clear skies with the ability to move large groups of people on eclipse day, either with ground, sea, or air transportation. Others, like this expedition, take their chances with a fixed location. As a result, a veteran meteorologist is always a part of each expedition.
We have Jay Anderson. He will be keeping tabs on the weather. That's the good news. The bad news, there isn't much we can do about it.
I've actually been a little disappointed in the past 2.5 weeks watching the weather and the satellite imagery because I've been wanting to bring down some examples of bad weather so I could show you what it was we're going to be looking out for with a certain amount of disenchantment. But I can't find any very good examples of bad weather. It's been unusually sunny here. Of course, you've all been your own weather forecasters because when you selected this site, and because we're not mobile, you were your own forecasters, you picked a site where you have about an 80% probability of the kind of weather that you have right now.
We have lectures this afternoon. We have lectures tomorrow afternoon here.
David Levy, author, amateur astronomer, and discoverer of over 12 comets to date, talks about the eclipse and variable stars.
A lot of us here are into astronomy for a number of different reasons. A lot of us are here because we want to simply enjoy astronomy. And how many of us plan to spend at least a small fraction of the eclipse just watching it? That's just about everybody. And I think that's really why we're here. We're here because we are going to be a part of a very interesting celestial lineup, something that was ordained 3, 4, 5 billion years ago when all these orbits were figured out by the Central Bureau for Astronomical Telegrams. And it was ordained that on this day and at this site, there would be a total eclipse of the sun. And so it's an interesting thing, an interesting perspective to look at. We're a part of something that has gone on for a long, long time. We're a part of something that is going to be repeated again for a long time. We are a part of that lineup, a four-body lineup of sun, earth, moon, and observer. What we are going to see is a form of variable star. We are definitely going to see the sun change in brightness. And the sun, for a couple of hours, is going to become a variable star. It's a bona fide type, an eclipsing variable star. It's going to be an unseen companion passing in front of it, and it's going to drop in brightness. It's going to drop in brightness very dramatically, and then rise again. You can make a light curve of it. There are stars all over the sky that do that every night, and you don't have to leave your home to watch them. They are called eclipsing binaries. We're watching this eclipse from Mexico, and from the middle of Mexico, which is not too far away from where 65 million years ago a huge comet nucleus, maybe 10 kilometers in diameter, slammed into the Earth. Couldn't be more than, very short distance from here. It resulted eventually in the extinguishing of almost all life forms from the planet, including the dinosaurs. When that event took place, as far and as long ago as that, it was still known in some deep celestial clockwork that today's eclipse would eventually take place, that the sun, the earth, and the moon would be lined up, but in a different way, in a much more peaceful way, when these orbits were all figured out a long, long time ago, when the earth and moon cooled off and assumed the present orbits that they had. The eclipse we're about to see was, in a sense, preordained. There's something about a total eclipse of the sun that goes to the core of your being. It is not the average, everyday thing that takes place in the sky. There are almost no other bodies that we know of in space where this can happen. It can only take place where there is a sun that is a distant object and the moon, which is a much closer object, that by coincidence happen to be almost exactly the same size for just a few minutes. And the Earth is part of the lineup, the sun is part of the lineup, the moon is part of the lineup, and most important thing is that the observer is a part of the lineup. So do you want to see nature take place? Do you want to be a part of a really interesting, neat, natural phenomenon? And you can, if you travel a little bit, to be part of a total eclipse of the sun.
A total eclipse occurs whenever the new moon passes directly between the Earth and Sun, casting its shadow on the surface of our planet. Even though the moon returns to new phase once every 29.5 days, the shadow usually passes completely above the North Pole or below the South Pole. Eclipses fall into three distinct categories. A partial eclipse occurs when the moon's larger shadow, or penumbra, just grazes the Earth. Annular eclipses occur when the alignment between Earth and moon is precise, but the moon's distance is such that the dark cone of the shadow, or umbra, never quite reaches the Earth. A total eclipse occurs when the umbra's point touches the planet, tracing a path across a small percentage of the Earth's surface. Eclipses of all types occur about twice each year, but the total eclipse is a rare event, occurring on the average once every year and a half. A total eclipse progresses through 4 stages. First contact occurs as the moon takes. Second contact is the first moment of totality. Third contact and fourth contact is the end of the eclipse, as the moon slides completely away from the sun. At just after 10 in the morning in La Paz, with an array of sunspots visible on the solar disk, first contact is made. The eclipse has begun. Dennis DeChico, associate editor of Sky and Telescope and noted authority on astrophotography, discusses the challenge of eclipse photography.
Since the 1960s, I have been chasing eclipses, primarily to photograph them. I've been every place from Canada to Australia. I've spent a month in the Sahara Desert. I've been on a ship in the Pacific Ocean. I've been in a small jet, 31,000 feet over the Montana-Idaho border, and I have seen eclipses annular, total, partial, lunar, partial and total, everything you can think of. And I don't believe that on any solar eclipse, the closest I have come to using conventional type equipment was the aircraft in 1979 over Montana. How many people here have never seen an eclipse before, total solar eclipse? Good number. All right. There's a lot of people here who have probably done deep sky photography, photography through long focus telescopes and things like that. And you get, I've done this, and you get this feeling that, oh, you know, I can do that, I can shoot an eclipse. What's an eclipse? You know, you got a half-degree diameter image. You don't even need to magnify the image that much. You want several degrees of sky around the sun, and you're taking snapshots, fraction of a second exposure. The two biggest problems are focus and vibration. It would be great if we were taking pictures of the eclipse which were 10 or 15 seconds long, because then these long focal lengths that we're using, all the vibrations would die out. The problem is you're trying to bang away a 50th or a 60th of a second exposure, and the mirror in your camera that's flapping up and down is causing vibration. And I rarely, if ever, see eclipse pictures which are razor sharp because they don't show any vibration. So there are things that you can do to sort of counteract that, but most people have a long focal length instrument on a small tripod. You can get an 80-inch focal length in a package that's this big, perfect for eclipses. It's this big. It goes in your hand-carry luggage. There is a problem with those instruments in focusing them, and it's also a problem in the way that people use them. In your 35mm camera, your film is flat, and your 35mm camera lenses are designed to focus all of that field on that flat piece of film. In other words, the focus at the center is the same as the focus at the edge. The telescopes, the Schmidt-Cassegrain telescopes in particular, have a curved focal surface. In fact, it is the shape of a concave dish. And in most designs, it is concave toward the sky. Think of it as a little bowl which is sitting there facing up at the objective end. You can focus the center of the field perfectly on this flat film, and then as you move further and further out on the film, the exact point of best focus is up further away from it. You can move that focus so that it's at the film, but then in the center, the point is out of focus. It's down away from the film. Well, if you stop and think about what happens in those last minutes before totality, most people swing the field of view, they swing the edge of the moon or that skinny crescent with their solar filter right into the center of the frame, and they focus it as sharp as they can. They'll do a darn good job at it. And then, during totality, what's at the center of the frame? The blank moon, black sky. And as you get further and further out, you discover that the limb of the moon is out of focus, and the corona, which is diffuse to begin with, is increasingly out of focus. So the trick, the way to counteract this, is just before totality, when you want to get your best focus, what you do is center the image where you're going to have it during the eclipse. Put the moon in the center. Now, it's going to be a little harder because you're going to be focusing off to the edge, and probably most of you have a microprism or some little clear spot in the center of the screen. But you're going to have to focus on that edge and do that. The other thing, and you'll get caught up in the excitement, we've got 6.5 minutes of totality here. Let's assume for a moment that most of you, at best, are going to go through one 36 exposure roll of film. That's what, 36 exposures, 6.5 minutes of totality? That is more than 10 seconds per exposure. And I'll guarantee you that you'll sit there during totality and listen to people next to you going bang, 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 as fast as they can snap off pictures. They can use up their roll of film in the first minute. So what you're better off doing probably is taking an exposure, advancing the film, letting the vibration die out. Try not to get caught up in the excitement. Try not to use all of your film in the beginning of the eclipse. Give yourself some time to look. Give yourself some time to actually refocus the image. Your finger is certainly more likely to introduce vibration. There's no way about that. A cable release is definitely to be preferred. The other alternate, if you don't have a cable release, and if you have a self-timer, set your equipment, set the self-timer, touch the button, and step back. Simple solutions. If you have a tripod, put your tripod in the lowest possible position. Sit on the ground if you can. Don't extend the legs up so you're standing there comfortably. That's a less stable circumstance than with your tripod all the way down.
Today, July 11th, 1991, the path of the moon's shadow first touches the Earth west of Hawaii, then sweeps across the planet at speeds in excess of 2,000 miles an hour. Before the shadow finally exits the Earth, millions of people will witness the event in Hawaii, in Baja California, in Mexico City, Central America, in Colombia, and in Brazil. And from above, advanced satellite imagery is already capturing the approaching shadow. Located at 103 degrees west longitude over the equator, at an altitude of 22,300 miles, the Geostationary Operational Environmental Satellite, GOES for short, scans the Earth, recording surface temperature and surface reflectivity. As shown in this looped recording, on this day, the satellite is able to record the entire eclipse at 20-minute intervals, showing the full width of the moon's penumbra. And although the penumbra is thousands of miles wide, it is only along the center line, a path with a maximum width of 160 miles, that the total eclipse is visible. In La Paz, second contact grows nearer. For the eclipse photographer, there are many sought-after prizes to capture on film. The corona, the sun's outer atmosphere, which can extend up to 2 or more solar diameters outward from the sun's disk. The corona produces no visible light itself, but actually reflects the wavelengths of sunlight from the sun's surface or photosphere. Baily's beads is another phenomena which can be viewed only in the few seconds just prior to second contact and just after third contact. This beautiful effect is caused by the last sliver of sunlight shining through valleys on the moon's edge. Magnificent solar prominences extending more than 80,000 miles into space. And the diamond ring, visible as the last point of sunlight, creates a brilliant jewel on the ring of corona behind the moon's dark disk. Dennis DeChico discusses the approach to totality and the prospects for capturing these photographic prizes.
When we get down to those last couple of minutes, there will be a very small shrinking crescent. And I will guarantee you with the group of people we have, there will be an incredible rising in the level of excitement among the people. It's fun to be with a group of people just for that reason. And in those last few seconds, when those last beads are extinguished, you'll tell it is the difference between almost day and night outside. I've told people that you can see an eclipse where 97% of the sun is covered, and if somebody didn't tell you, you could conceivably walk around outside and not know that something was going on in the sky. It gets kind of a funny, steely color to the sky. You can see the shadow rising up in the west as it approaches us. It's almost sort of like an afternoon thunderstorm sometime we've all experienced. It's the only thing I can liken it to is a building thunderstorm. But it's only in the last minute, and you start counting down the last few seconds, that it gets dark very fast. How it literally goes from day to night. It's a remarkable thing. Photosphere is the surface of the sun that we look at. That's what we see when we go out there today if you hold a filter up and look at it. Above the photosphere, we're going to be looking, remember when the sun gets completely covered, we're looking along the limb of the sun. There's something called a chromosphere. And this is a transition point. It's an extremely high temperature area. It's where the light is coming from emission lines. The advancing moon will cover the chromosphere very rapidly, at which point we may be left with any big prominences that are sticking out and just the corona. And we'll have the corona for 6 minutes, and then the opposite will come out on the other side. The moon is incredibly large at this eclipse compared to the sun. The problem is the corona, the brightness of the corona drops off incredibly fast as you move out from the limb of the sun. And what's going to happen is even after the advancing moon totally covers the sun, there's still going to be 2 arc minutes of the inner corona covered on the opposite side of the moon, because the moon is 2 arc minutes bigger than the sun, and that's going to knock the coronal brightness down a whole lot. When you get 2 arc minutes out from the limb of the sun, the brightness has dropped off by an order of magnitude, and which means it's going to be difficult to photograph and get a glow all the way around and still get the diamond.
Yeah, you see them all on there? See all the spots, flowers?
As totality draws closer, a well-placed mirror projects the partial phase on a nearby wall. And every point of light shining through the branches and leaves becomes a lens with 1,000 miniature eclipses. An eclipse expedition, by its very nature, is more than just scientific lectures. The moon's shadow brings the eclipse chasers to wonderful and often exotic locations, and this year was no exception. Virginia Roth, president of Scientific Expeditions, comments on the growing popularity of eclipse tours.
If you were to ask me what the average age was, for this particular tour, I'd have to say 8 months to 80 years of age. Basically, our company has always been involved in special interest tours. How I first got involved handling eclipse chasers was way back in 1973 of the big eclipse in Africa. They had a group that wanted to go to Africa to watch the eclipse of the sun, and that was my first introduction to eclipse chasers. I think the most wonderful and exciting thing about eclipse chasing is that you have something to look forward to every year.
The subject of safety is always a concern with any solar event. The rules are simple. During the partial phases, do not look directly at the sun, either with the unaided eye, through unfiltered binoculars, or an unfiltered telescope. Always use a proper solar filter, and be sure that your telescope is properly filtered as well. During totality, it's safe to view the eclipse with the naked eye and with filters removed from your telescope. At the end of totality, exercise the same precautions as before totality. No one wants a permanent memory of their eclipse trip. Dennis DeChico.
The question is, when is it safe to remove the filter? Since many of you have not seen a total eclipse, The same sun is out there today as there will be at the time of the eclipse. You wouldn't go out and stare at the sun right now. It's too dangerous. I mean, your brain will tell you you can't look at it. Let's face it, it's too bright. The only time it becomes a problem during the eclipse is when a good portion of the sun is covered by the moon, because at that point you can sort of convince yourself to look at the sun for a longer time. This is not recommended, obviously, to do that. But what damages your eye is that not the brightness of the light, but the heat. You actually, you raise the temperature a couple of degrees centigrade and you damage the retina. And I have seen pictures of retinas that have little crescents burned right into the retina. But the problem is not so much that you're going to damage your eye permanently, but you will dazzle yourself to the point you will not have a good view during totality. It's just, I mean, an incredibly bright light staring at it. By the time totality comes, you're all going to be going, why can't I see anything?
Number 9 will be number 9. But more important to me is the fact that a total solar eclipse is perhaps the most gorgeous thing in the entire universe. And I'm going to go and see everyone I can see. I'm going to photograph everyone I can photograph. I'm going to go home and show my friends and relatives and say, hey guys, you want to see something terrific? This is it. And as I said, beauty, sheer pure beauty. Because it is not just a visual event. The light changes, the sounds change. You hear the wildlife going berserk. You feel the excitement of the people you're with. It's different in a group than it is alone. There's a shared excitement, a tension. Since we saw the 1973 eclipse off the coast of Africa, this is almost like an old friend. This one is the next in the same series, the same Saros series as the 1973. So suddenly we're now, in a sense, renewing an acquaintanceship. There is this sudden feeling of continuity now in, for the first time, seeing the successor in a series that we've already seen one of. And that's kind of a new dimension to the whole thing.
This is the third eclipse I see. I was with a friend, schoolmate, in 1958 at my first eclipse on the Canary Island. And my second was the one in Africa, 1973. And this would be my third one. I'm choosing the long one of the century. Well, it's the exceptionality of a nature event. Like could be a volcanic eruption, and it's not something, it's something expected, so we can plan it, but it's something very exceptional, which nature brings. It's not just the eclipse, which the eclipse is the things to start with, but around the eclipse we usually make traveling, and this brightens our knowledge too.
I can't really come out with a favorite eclipse because I take little vignettes from each eclipse and put them all together, and each one of them is a special moment. It sort of puts you in your place a little bit when you realize that these massive events from planets and moons are taking place thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of miles away, and it has this distinct sort of very, very impressive impact here on the Earth. You feel a little more your place in the universe when these things happen. You realize that everything that happens doesn't happen in the first 6 feet of the Earth, about as high as a man goes. But there are other people who come because they like the camaraderie. There are people who come because they're techno freaks. They really like to use a lot of technology. They like to bring their computers. They like to bring their cameras, their telescopes. They like to talk with people about cameras and telescopes and computers. This is a great place to do that because you get a whole bunch of like-minded, curious individuals who are here. The eclipse isn't just totality. It's the approach to totality and the departure from totality. It's the change in the way the light affects you. The last 5 minutes before an eclipse is a really eerie event, and the light is just magnificent. It's something you have to feel. Light almost becomes a tactile thing at that point. It isn't something you see visually, it's something you feel. Like in the best Vincent Price movie, it's an eerie feeling, but you know what's causing it, and you can see this spectacular thing, and everybody's holding their breath as the last piece of the sun disappears.
Well, everything's gonna get dark because the moon's gonna cover up the sun, and you get to see that light around the dark spot, and you get, and it's gonna be real exciting, I think.
To many people, the fact that an eclipse occurs at all is miraculous. Consider that the moon is 1/400th the diameter of the sun, but yet is only 1/400th as distant. The result, as viewed from Earth, is a nearly perfect match between sun and moon. Even a minor change in the moon's distance or diameter would prevent this magnificent spectacle from being visible at all.
I come because I find the total eclipse of the sun to be one of the greatest spectacles in nature. It's just an incredible experience, which goes beyond even just seeing it. And I think that for many people have heard that or have seen one before, and so they come for that reason. But I think there's also a lot of other people that are coming because they want to photograph it. This is really something that they're interested in, that matters to them, their hobby that's more important to them than what they really do for a living. And they want to go there and do it and then show what they've got to the people with similar interests. When I was in Seattle recently, an extended period for American Astronomical Society meeting, I wound up speaking at 4 different middle school and elementary school classes in Bellevue and Seattle, Washington. And each of them, I spent part of my time on the eclipse. And I find the kids are really interested. And one of the things it teaches them is the use of math. Lots of ways you might not think of. I mean, without math, you don't know where an eclipse is going to be or even that it's going to occur. And when I go around the world, when other astronomers go around the world in expeditions, whether you're going someplace in a developed nation or you're going out in the bush in the third world, what most surprises local people, what they find most remarkable, is not anything that goes on in the eclipse, even with that great spectacle, though they enjoy it too. It's that you knew where to come and when to come. People that aren't into math can't get over that.
You feel a little bit like you can appreciate what primitive man might have felt watching this thing happen in the sky and not knowing what it's about. And really, I suppose we have absolutely no control over it. So you're at whatever mercy is going to be out there. Certainly a group of people are united by that experience, and there's nothing that can ever separate you. You get to make friendships extremely fast and very strong in a few days. In 1983, when we were in Indonesia, we were in the middle of nowhere, near where they had a school that was run by a Christian group to teach English to people. And those people were asked to serve kind of as interpreters during the eclipse. And those people also accompanied us to the eclipse. And they were one of the few groups of people in Indonesia that were allowed to watch the eclipse, because everyone else was asked to go into the mosques or stay inside to protect their eyes from damage and to protect their vision of the world as the Muslims might feel it should be interpreted. So these people were with us, and the soldiers were guarding the field that we were sitting in, watching the eclipse. So during that process, it's getting darker and darker. The soldiers are called in over their walkie-talkies. Better come in now, it's getting really dark, you're not supposed to see the total eclipse. And they would say, just a minute, I'll be right there, we presume in Indonesian. And then they would be asked another 30 seconds later, come in right away. And we heard one guy say, okay, and turn the walkie-talkie off and stay there to watch it. And during totality, while we were so excited ourselves because of the scientific or the beautiful things that were happening, the people that were the interpreters for us, who were all our age, like, 20s and 30s, for instance, were just thrilled to pieces. And we were holding hands with them. We were crying together, and we were looking up into the sky and looking at all the beautiful things which they'd never learned about except in a book and had certainly never experienced before. And we were able to share that sort of first time look at things with them. And I think that's one of the special moments for me during eclipses. This kind of the human interaction that was so precious.
Anyone who's an amateur astronomer would love to see an eclipse. It's been said a number of times in the past that a total solar eclipse is probably the most spectacular, predictable event on Earth. you know, a volcanic eruption or something that's unpredictable. And certainly from a celestial standpoint, there could be spectacular comets that are just tremendous as well. But those things cannot be predicted. But an eclipse can. But I've discovered that when you get to these events, there are far more than just amateur astronomers here. There are some of the people who return time and time and time again are peripherally interested in astronomy, but they have either seen one eclipse and just simply been caught up in it. They want to see another one. Everybody experiences an eclipse a different way. And as time has gone on, and this may be a draw for why some people come back, it is very hard to take in all the phenomena that occur at a given eclipse. I mean, look for the shadow approaching, maybe look for bright planets or stars. Of course, the corona is different each time that you see it. Prominences are different, Bailey's beads are different. But you always feel like afterwards, especially when you're with a group of people, that somebody will say, "Did you see this?" And you might go, "Oh, I missed it that time." So the next time you'll be looking for it. You go back. This time there'll probably be lots of people who will look for shadow bands or something. And there's always the element of surprise. I mean, there have been several eclipses this century where very bright comets have been seen near the sun during an eclipse that were unknown. Who knows? Might have something like that turn up. When I was young and got interested in astronomy, I had a very small telescope, and immediately I wanted a larger telescope, and it was nothing that I could afford. And I went to the library and got some books, and I discovered that people that were doing this interesting photography made their own telescopes. And I thought, oh my God, I never thought that that could be done. And I quickly became a telescope maker, and that is something that has fascinated me ever since the beginning. So I love equipment, you know, and the homemade stuff and all the jerry-rigged equipment and the unusual stuff. Yeah, I mean, that's really something that fascinates me from a personal level. And everybody has different ideas and different plans. That's why, in some respects, I don't like being a spokesman for saying how you should go photograph the eclipse, because if I tell you what to do and you think that that's the way it should be done, then it's going to, you know, a lot of creativity will be lost. I'm involved with the amateur telescope making conventions, and I love to see the different stuff that shows up. You know, and again, sometimes people want plans to tell me exactly how do I make something, and I say, here's the idea of how you make it, now go out and do it yourself. You know, solve your own problems, and you'll come up with maybe you'll find a new way that somebody else hasn't thought about before.
Everything is ready. Equipment is covered and protected. The sky grows noticeably darker, and the winds over the bay are calming down. From above, the shadow rushes closer to the Baja Peninsula. From below, events now begin to happen very quickly.
Taking the filter off. Filters off.
Sunset colors. Look at the sunset colors rising.
Here it comes. Look at the shadows of the clouds. Sunset, look at that. It's incredible. Oh, there it is. Diamond ring.
Yeah. Gee, fantastic.
There's a flare of prominence to the east.
Oh, brother.
There's another star. There's 2 stars.
Yeah.
Another one over there.
Can you get it?
Oh, look at the
Yeah, look at the horizon.
skyline.
To the west. Twilight. Oh!
It's a sun flare.
Yeah, you see it. Look at the horizon.
Yeah. Oh, this is incredible. Halfway. Halfway.
Right over there.
Zooming out.
Right over there. Yeah, because it's like up in San Francisco, it's just down in Colorado. Yeah. Oh, yeah. 2:45 to go.
Yeah, because I know Capella was on the map.
Well, that's first sign. Okay. Okay. Ryan is over here. Reggie.
2.5 to go.
Check out the, pay attention.
Hey, it's brightening out here in the...
Yes, getting brighter.
15.
Look how bright that problem is. Look how bright it's been brighter.
That's just right at the top of the little thing. I can see it.
Yeah.
Minute and a half to go. Minute and 15.
Checking.
You know what? I
Stopping down further. This is 1/4000.
1 minute.
Gotta stay here.
Look at it. Look at it. Starting out west.
You'll see that big progress that coming down.
25 seconds. Look. 30 seconds.
Yes, our anchor light came on.
Oh, yeah.
The automatic anchor light.
15.
I want to watch it come back over the... Doug, you want to walk down here and watch it? Over the mountain. Yeah, on this side.
6:25, end of totality. Supposedly.
And it's just, everything is anticlimactic. You're sitting there and you hear somebody say, halfway, and you think, no, it's too soon. And then he says, 1 minute, it's too soon.
The Corona was the best I've ever seen.
Corona was incredible.
Having been involved with astronomy on an amateur level for what, I don't know, closing in on 30 years. I've met a number of people who have become involved in it. Some have gone on to become professional astronomers and whatnot. A surprising number of those people were inspired by some particular event. Maybe they saw a comet when they were young. One of the fellows that I work with on an open night had gone to the U.S. Naval Observatory and been shown Saturn in the telescope. There may be people here, there may be some of these younger people that are coming with parents who are interested, who will see an eclipse for the first time. It just may ignite the flame that becomes something that will consume them for the rest of their lives. They may fall into science, they may become astronomers.
Even an eclipse is something rhythmic. We speak about the Saros cycle, and this eclipse will follow the last I saw. And well, human beings are just part of some cycle, generations coming and going. So is an eclipse, the same thing.
For the men and women who have witnessed this great solar event, the memories are indelible. For many, it was the most magnificent ever. For others, words cannot express the beauty and the emotion. And for each total solar eclipse to come, for those fortunate enough to chase the moon's shadow, may you have clear skies.